Caution: knowledge without application is masturbation. Don't just learn something just to learn it. Be able to apply it to something. So today I'd like to share with you a couple of book recommendations. And I know this seems like a little more than a couple, but I didn't really start reading till maybe a couple of years ago. I didn't really appreciate my formal education. I didn't really work that hard. But a couple of years after I graduated, I picked up a book and slowly started reading. And so don't overwhelm yourself with this. Just pick up a book and read one page a day or 5 minutes at a time. And eventually, you'll start reading more and more a day. It'll become a habit. But don't overwhelm yourself. What I'm currently reading, just to share that with you, is a book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Just talking about negotiation. It was written by an FBI hostage negotiator. An excellent book because it references not only negotiations in law enforcement, but business type negotiations, and just dealing with your everyday situations, whether it be parenting or whatever the case is. So I would suggest reading a wide variety of books. I've broken this down into a couple of different categories, but read a wide variety of books. And just because you read a book doesn't mean you have to subscribe to that person's ideas or adopt that person's perspective. It may just shed light on your own perspectives. It may change your mind on something, or it may just make you more steadfast in your own belief. So don't worry about reading a book on a perspective that's different than yours. It's the mark of an educated mind to entertain an idea without adopting it. So onto these recommendations. What I've grouped into mindset, On Killing and Non-Combat, two different books by Dave Grossman, talking about the psychological, physiological, and other effects of combat and having to take another life, etc. Long books, but they are worth the money, especially if you spend it on the audio version of those books. In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day by Mark Batterson is all about the warrior's mindset. It is written about one of King David's elite soldiers from the Old Testament, and so it is written from a Christian's perspective. However, the mindset behind being a warrior is highlighted in this book, and I highly recommend it to anybody in a profession that requires the warrior mindset. Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins goes through his story. David Goggins was a Navy SEAL, and it's really a beautiful book because he doesn't fluff it up and he doesn't hide anything. He really goes into detail about how many times he failed before he became a Navy SEAL and eventually worked his way towards accomplishing that. Books in psychology, The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker speaks about your instinct and fear, and differentiates fear from chronic worrying, one stemming from instinct and the other one stemming from just worrying all up in your head. Fear by Osho. Anything written by Osho I recommend. He just dives deep into psychology and how it affects you. Another one I didn't write down here, but I've referenced before, is The Undiscovered Self by Carl Jung. Good book. Some of these older books, these are older guys. Osho and Carl Jung are much more visceral than current writings. Some miscellaneous books. Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Really anything written by Ralph Waldo Emerson I recommend. But if you're just going to pick one, I'd recommend Self-Reliance. Again, he comes from an age where authors were a lot more potent, a lot more, they were visceral in the writing. And so I could only read a little bit of Emerson's writing at a time because there was so much in it. Masculinity, masculine psychology, stuff like that. I'd recommend King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. It explains what a wholly integrated man is and balanced between these 4 archetypes. This was written by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette, who were students of Carl Jung, and they further developed Carl Jung's work on the archetype. Masculine Psychology, The Way of Men by Jack Donovan, another excellent book, especially this day and age, where we are severely lacking in true masculinity. In this book, The Way of Men points out some differences between masculine energy, feminine energy, and I'm not really making a judgment whether what's good or bad, it's just describing what each of those are. Books for cops. If I were to recommend just one book for a cop, I would recommend Left of Bang. Left of Bang kind of works off of Gavin de Becker's work in The Gift of Fear, and it goes into great depths explaining your instinct and being able to articulate objectively why your instinct reacts to something. So the problem that the authors had leading up to this book, I can't remember the author's name, but they were 2 guys who were spearheading the Marine Corps' Combat Hunter program, and the problem they had was going into combat this day and age, it's no longer uniform versus uniform, it's uniform versus anything, a disguise or normal clothing, and so they had to look at behaviors over readily identifying a uniform. And then for cops, anything written by Dave Grossman, again, on Killing on Combat, I would recommend. Books for patriots. Read the Constitution. Read the Declaration of Independence. This little booklet has both. Really easy to read. But you'd be shocked how many people don't actually read it. Just crack this little thing open, spend less than an hour, and you'll have read it. It's important to know. And if you want to dive a little bit deeper into those topics and perspectives from the men who developed it, read the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers. And those have differentiating viewpoints on the federal versus states' rights and not having one large federal government. So, again, that's a book that you can read, or both of those you can read, whether you agree with it or not. You can gain some perspective and insight behind why our country was formed as a constitutional republic, and the thoughts behind each. Another book for patriots, Common Sense by the original T-Pain. He was the one that coined the term Sunshine Patriot. And then Animal Farm in 1984 by George Orwell. You would be shocked to see how close this day and age we are to what George Orwell wrote way back when. And then another one, Anthem by Ayn Rand, I would consider very similar to George Orwell's 1984. This one is shorter but drier. Ayn Rand came from communist Russia, USSR, whatever it may be. She changed her name when she got here, and she started writing a bunch of stuff. I think I forgot to mention The Virtue of Selfishness by Ayn Rand, which is a great book to shed some individual perspective on the current politics. And then some books for warriors. Gates of Fire by Pressfield. Historical fiction about the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae. Excellent book. 5 Rings by Mushi Musashi, which I think everybody has heard of. Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein. Better than the movie, which every nerd says. But this book is great to shed light on a military's perspective and war and the politics behind it. And then lastly, Armor by John Stakely, another war political type fictional novel set in the future like Starship Troopers. So that's it. That's just a couple of recommendations from me. Remember, as Mark Twain said, don't let your schooling get in the way of your education. So gain some dangerous perspectives, gain some dangerous knowledge,